Chapter 1. The Starving Stranger. The town of Red Hollow lay half buried in dust, its crooked saloon sign squeaking in the evening wind. The last glow of sun bled orange across the wide prairie, shadows stretching long over wagon ruts and broken fences. A woman stumbled down the main street, her steps uneven, her dress torn and caked in the trail's grit. She pressed an arm across her ribs as though holding herself together, her eyes glassy with thirst. The saloon doors creaked open. Laughter and the sharp clink of glasses spilled out. But when she leaned toward the light, a barkeep snapped his rag toward her like shooing a stray dog. "Ain't no handouts here. Get along." Her stomach growled so loudly a cowboy at the poker table snorted. She swallowed the shame and staggered on, the boards beneath her boots groaning as though tired of her weight. At the far end of the street, where the shadows of the prairie met the edge of town, he appeared. A man, no, a giant, broad-shouldered, a black hat low over his brow, the gleam of spurs catching the dying light. He stood beside a massive chestnut horse, saddle-worn from years of hard rides. Her legs gave out. She crumpled to her knees in the dust, hands clawing for balance. The stranger's boots thudded closer, each step slow, measured, like a man used to being obeyed. He loomed over her, jaw set hard beneath a week's worth of stubble. His eyes, gray as gunmetal, studied her without a hint of softness. He crouched, the leather of his coat creaking. "You hungry?" His voice was gravel, low and steady. She tried to speak, but her throat was sand. Only a croak escaped. He pulled a canteen from his belt and held it out, but when she reached, his grip didn't loosen. His gaze locked with hers. "You'll birth my sons," he said, slow as a death sentence, "or you'll feed my pigs. That's the choice I give." Her fingers trembled on the metal. Her pride screamed at her to spit in his face. But her empty stomach twisted so fiercely she thought she might faint. She drank. The water was lukewarm, bitter with iron, and the sweetest thing she'd ever tasted. When she lowered the canteen, she found him still watching her. Not cruelly, not kindly either, just measuring. "You got a name?" he asked. Her lips cracked into the ghost of a whisper. "Evelyn." He straightened, towering against the setting sun, casting her in shadow. "Then get up, Evelyn. You're coming with me." The prairie wind carried the distant howl of a coyote. The bargain, spoken in dust and desperation, hung heavier than the desert sky. Chapter 2. The bargain at sunset. The prairie bled into night as Evelyn swayed in the saddle before him, her frail frame held steady only by the giant's arm. Caleb's horse carried them beyond Red Hollow, hooves drumming on hard-packed earth. The town lights dwindled behind, swallowed by distance and dust. The ranch came into view at the crest of a ridge, fences stretching wide, barns looming like hulking silhouettes, and a house of timber and stone stubborn against the wind. The air smelled of hay, sweat, and smoke. Evelyn's belly nodded at the scent of roasted meat wafting from somewhere within. Caleb swung down, boots crunching gravel, and reached up to catch her as if she weighed nothing at all. His grip was unyielding, the calluses on his palms scraping her thin arms. He didn't guide her to the house, but to the barn, its wide doors yawning open to the glow of a lantern. "You'll sleep here," he said flatly. "Barn's warm enough. Straw due till you prove your worth." She looked up, lips parted, but the words died under the weight of his stare. He set a tin plate down on a crate, half a biscuit, a slab of salt pork, and a cup of black coffee. The smell nearly broke her. She fell to her knees and ate without grace, crumbs catching in her hair, hands shaking. Caleb leaned against a beam, arms folded. He watched her like a man watches a storm rolling over the hills, waiting to see if it'll pass or tear the place apart. "You got folks?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not any more." His jaw ticked. He nodded once, slow. then you'll earn your keep here. Ain't charity on this land." His voice softened a fraction, though his face never did. "Better women than you have starved trying to make it alone." She set the empty tin down and dared a glance at him. The lantern light caught the scar that curved across his cheek, deep and pale, like some old wound carved into stone. Despite his harsh words, there was something in his eyes, a loneliness, maybe, that unsettled her more than his eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. His boot scuffed the dirt as he shifted. "Because you walked into my path, and I don't believe in chance. You stay, you live. You leave, you die. Simple as that." The barn creaked as a night wind pushed through. Outside, the horizon glowed faint with the last remnants of sunset. Evelyn lay back on the straw, the weight of his bargain pressing on her chest heavier than the roof beams above. And Caleb, standing in shadow, watched her until sleep claimed her, his expression unreadable. Chapter 3. Sparks in the Dust. By the time the morning sun spilled gold across the plains, Evelyn had been put to work. Her hands, soft once, now bore scratches from mending fences, blisters from hauling water. The ranch hands watched her with smirks, muttering crude remarks under their breath. One spat tobacco into the dirt and drawled, "Caleb's charity case won't last a week." She kept her head down, lips tight, but shame burned hot as the midday sun. Caleb said nothing, just barked orders in that gravel voice. Yet she noticed his eyes lingered on her longer than on the men. By dusk, the prairie stilled, the air heavy with the smell of sagebrush. Evelyn brushed down the horses in corral, their hides warm beneath her palm, when a rider galloped in, shouting breathless news. Bandits! Hit the Miller place. Headed this way. The ranch erupted into motion. Men scrambled for rifles, the younger hands pale with fear. Evelyn's heart hammered. She clutched the stall gate as dust rose on the horizon. Then she saw Caleb. He moved with the calm of a man carved from stone. He strapped a rifle across his back, adjusted his hat low, and swung into the saddle of his chestnut stallion. The horse snorted, eager, sensing battle. "Stay in the barn," he ordered her, voice like iron. But when the bandits came, 6 of them, wild-eyed and drunk on violence, Evelyn couldn't look away. Shots cracked sharp against the sky. Horses screamed. Dust turned the air thick and choking. Caleb rode straight into the chaos, a giant among men, his rifle firing with deadly precision. One bandit toppled, then another. The others scattered, but not before a bullet grazed Caleb's shoulder, tearing through his coat. He staggered in the saddle, teeth bared, and with one last shot sent the raiders fleeing into the night. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of men and the whimpering of injured horses. Evelyn rushed from the barn despite his order. Blood seeped dark into Caleb's sleeve. She pressed a trembling hand to the wound, eyes shining with a fear she dared not speak. "You'll bleed out," she whispered. He caught her wrist, rough fingers closing over hers. His gray eyes, stormy, fierce, met hers without flinching. "This ain't the first time I've been shot, woman." Yet his grip trembled. For a moment, the mask cracked. She saw pain, yes, but also something deeper, a loneliness carved by years of battles fought alone. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Saloon. The Miller raid had been the talk of Red Hollow all week, but it wasn't the bandits folks whispered about. It was Evelyn, when she walked into town beside Caleb, her dress mended but plain, her hair combed but still falling loose. Conversations hushed, cards stilled in mid-shuffle, whiskey glasses paused mid-air. The piano man let a note hang too long before the tune limped back to life. "She's the one," a woman hissed near the bar, voice sharp as a knife. Living under Caleb's roof, sleeping in his barn like a bought wife. Another man snorted into his drink. "Reckon she's cheaper than whiskey. Poor fool must be desperate. The words struck like stones. Evelyn kept her gaze fixed on the warped floorboards, her cheeks burning. The saloon smelled of sweat, smoke, and stale beer, pressing in on her from all sides. She wished she could vanish into the wood. Caleb stood tall at her side, shadows stretching long in the lamplight. His spurs clicked slow and steady as he crossed the bar. He ordered whiskey in that gravel voice of his, calm as ever. But when the laughter rose behind them, low and mean, his hand stilled around the glass. One of the ranch hands, a wiry man with too much whiskey in him, leaned back in his chair. "Hey, Caleb, you gonna auction her off when you're tired of her, or just pass her round?" The room erupted in cruel laughter. Evelyn froze, every muscle taut, throat tight with humiliation. Then came the silence. A silence so sharp it cut through smoke and chatter alike. Caleb turned. Slowly. The chair legs scraped as men shifted uneasily. His gray eyes fixed on the drunk like a noose tightening. He drew his revolver in a single, smooth motion and leveled it across the room. The click of the hammer echoed like thunder. "You got one chance," Caleb said, voice low and steady, every word carrying like a church bell. "You leave her name out your mouth, or you leave this town in a box." The man swallowed hard, his bravado draining with the color from his face. Chairs scraped as his friends pulled him back, muttering apologies. Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs. She dared a glance at Caleb. His arm was steady, his eyes storm-dark. But beneath the iron she caught something else. Something raw. He holstered the gun without another word. The saloon breathed again, the piano stumbling into a tune. But the air had shifted. Everyone in Red Hollow knew. Caleb's word was law, and the stranger woman was under his protection. Evelyn's breath shuddered out, and for the first time, she wondered if his bargain wasn't just about labor or sons. Maybe, against his will, he had claimed her as something far more dangerous. His own. Chapter 5. Fire and Confession. The night began quiet, heavy with the hum of cicadas and the distant yip of coyotes. Evelyn had just finished mending a tear in her dress when the smell hit. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. Smoke. A shout tore through the ranch yard. Fire. The barn's ablaze. Evelyn bolted outside. Flames licked the sky, turning the dark into a hellish orange glow. Horses screamed, kicking against their stalls, and the wind whipped sparks in the air like vengeful stars. Caleb was already there, his coat thrown aside, his broad frame black against the inferno. "Get the men to the well," he barked, voice carrying over the roar of fire. Buckets clattered, boots pounded, panic rising. Without thinking, Evelyn ran toward the barn. "Woman!" Caleb roared. "Stay back!" But she didn't. The prize stallion, his pride, his bloodline, was inside, thrashing in terror. Evelyn pulled her skirt over her mouth, eyes watering as smoke clawed her lungs. She fumbled with the latch, the heat blistering her skin, and the stallion exploded out, nearly trampling her as it fled into the night. She collapsed to her knees, coughing, the world a blur of orange and black. Strong arms scooped her up. Caleb carried her out just as the roof groaned and collapsed behind them. They tumbled into the dirt, the fire's heat searing their backs. His body shielded hers until the crack and crash faded into the night. "Fool woman," he growled, his voice breaking on the edge of something not anger but fear. His hands trembled as they cupped her soot-streaked face. "You could have died." Her chest heaved, breath ragged. "So could you," she whispered. For once, the giant cowboy had no answer. His gray eyes, usually cold steel, glistened with something raw and unguarded. His thumb brushed ash from her cheek as though memorizing the shape of her. "I made that bargain," he said hoarsely, "because I needed someone to stay, not for pigs, not for sons, but because this life don't forgive a man alone. And I've been alone too damn long." Evelyn's heart stuttered. The fire behind them still roared, painting the night in embers, but here, pressed beneath him, she felt a different kind of heat. She reached for his hand, her fingers slipping into his calloused palm. Then stop pretending I'm just a bargain. The space between them vanished. His lips crashed against hers, tasting of smoke and desperation. For the first time, his armor of cruelty shattered, leaving only a man, scarred, broken, but hers. The fire consumed the barn, but in its light something else was born, a promise unspoken, forged not in threat but in flame. Chapter 6. Sons of the Dust. The barn was nothing but smoking ruins when dawn crept over the prairie. Ash floated on the breeze, soft as snow, settling over blackened timbers and scorched earth. Men moved like ghosts through the wreckage, silent, eyes hollow from the night's fight. Evelyn sat on the ranch house steps, hair tangled with soot, dress singed at the hem. Her hands still shook from what they had lived through. Yet when she looked up, she saw Caleb standing at the edge of the ruins, his broad shoulders silhouetted by the pale sunrise. He looked every inch the giant she had first feared. But now she saw the weariness, the scars, the loneliness carved deep beneath that iron frame. He turned, meeting her gaze across the yard. Slowly, deliberately, he walked toward her, boots crunching over the brittle ground. The ranch hands watched, whispering, but none dared speak aloud. He stopped before her, hat in hand, ash streaking his cheek. For the first time since she had known him, Caleb's voice carried no command, no bargain, only truth. "I don't want a servant," he said. "Don't want a woman bound by threats or hunger. I want you, not because you own me, but because—" His jaw worked, searching for words as if they were heavier than any rifle. "Because when you walked into my life, I stopped being alone." Evelyn's throat tightened. She rose slowly, her palm brushing the soot from his chest, lingering over the thud of his heart. "And when you pulled me from the dirt," she whispered, "I started to believe I still had a life to live." For a moment, the world hushed, the prairie wind, the distant cattle lowing, even the murmur of the men. Caleb bent, pressing his forehead to hers, gray eyes closing as though he could will her into his bones. "Stay," he murmured. "Stay and be mine. Not by bargain, not by force. By choice." Tears burned her smoke-stung eyes, but her smile broke through. "I already chose, Caleb, long before the fire." His lips found hers again, soft this time, unhurried, the kiss not a desperation but a promise. The ranch hands turned away, muttering, but some smiled, tipping hats. They all knew. The giant cowboy had found his equal. Later that morning, they rode into town together. The saloon door swung wide, every eye turning. Evelyn's hand was tucked in his, her chin high, no longer the starving stray, but the woman who had stood in flame and claimed her place. Caleb's presence beside her silenced the whispers before they began. Outside, the prairie stretched endless beneath the rising sun. Horses stamped, dust rose, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and smoke. The future would be hard, scarred by fire and toil. But as Caleb's arm circled her waist, she knew it would be theirs. Not sons from duty, not life from hunger, but love, born in dust and flame. The sun was sinking low, bleeding fire across the horizon, turning the plains into a sea of gold and shadow. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant wood smoke, while the faint thrum of saloon music drifted from Red Hollow. Horses stamped in the corral, their silhouettes sharp against the dying light. Evelyn stood on the ridge above the ranch, skirts tugged by the breeze. Behind her lay the scars of fire and hardship, the ashes of all they had lost. Before her stretched the wide, untamed west, dangerous, merciless. But there's a claim. Caleb came up behind her, boots crunching softly on dry earth. He slid an arm around her waist, pulling her close. His hat shadowed his storm-gray eyes, but his voice carried steady, surer. I once told you birth my sons or feed my pigs, he said, rough with memory. But I was a fool. What I needed was someone to walk beside me. Evelyn's lips curved, tears catching the last of the light. She laid her hand against his scarred cheek, tender and unafraid. And what I needed was a reason to keep walking. You gave me that. They kissed as the sky burned out of purple, and stars began their slow reveal. The ranch hands cheered from below, but the world narrowed to two souls bound by dust, blood, and fire. When they parted, Caleb tipped his hat low and whispered the words that would carry through the years. Not a bargain, not a chain, just you and me. And together, they walked into the sunset,